Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session this afternoon. My name is Angela Franklin, and I'll be presenting on using groundwater modeling to assess the impacts of managed aquifer recharge within the shallow coastal aquifers of Guyana. I just give a few lines about myself. I'm very passionate about water resources, particularly from, well, the full spectrum from research to management at the policy level. And I have BSc in environmental studies and MSc in applied hydrogeology. I have worked with the local Environmental Protection Agency of Guyana as a senior environmental officer within the water quality unit. And I'm currently employed at the Guyana Water Incorporated as a hydrologist within the water resources unit. So I wanted to start off with talking about what managed aquifer recharge is, just as a refresher for those who may know already, and what is it? And this is the artificial replenishing of our groundwater system. So in cases where we may have a limited natural recharge to an aquifer, or where we may need to abate a problem, we can create a system or devise a system that allows us to inject or allow water to infiltrate an aquifer system, thereby adding artificial recharge to it. You may ask why we would want to use a managed aquifer recharge system. And as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, we might want to abate a problem. As it is right now, a lot of countries are faced with the impacts of climate change, whether it's from reduced rainfall or increased abstraction as their consumption increases. Those are some of the reasons we would want to use managed aquifer recharge if we're starting to have a significant impact on our aquifer system, particularly in depleting it. Other reasons for using a MAR system would be, for example, controlling the hydrological variability. So if the rate of replenishment exceeds our rate of abstraction, we want to ensure a stable supply. And another, but not the last reason, would be for us to control saltwater intrusion, particularly for coastal aquifers, as we have in Guyana. They tend to be under threat from saline intrusion if abstraction along the coast is heavier than the rate of replenishment, thereby drawing the saltwater, freshwater incline closer to the freshwater source. So to introduce Guyana, Guyana is little under 215 square kilometers in land mass. It has three major physiographical features: it's a continental shelf, the low coastal plain where 90% of the population resides, and the highlands. We're known as the land of many waters. We have 5 major rivers. The others are too numerous to mention during this presentation. Our population is relatively small, with just under 750,000 as of our last census in 2012. In the diagram, you can see on the first image, the image on the left has the physiographic features, and on the second, the one on the right, you can see the colored separations within the map are depicting our administrative regions within Guyana. So we have 10 of them, And this project, it was focused on one of those, which is the Pomeroon Supernam, and that's the second one from the top on the right. Right? Guyana, for those who are not familiar, experiences a tropical climate with 2 wet seasons and 2 dry seasons. Our annual precipitation over the northern half of the country exceeds 2,000 mm per year. This is a little less in the southern part, as they have a savanna environment and experience a different precipitation pattern with only 1 wet and dry season. However, the coastal aquifer of interest and right now, the recharge area, if you look at the image on the right, the blue portions of that image on the map represent the recharge area for the coastal aquifers. And this accounts for approximately 13,000 square kilometers. And rainfall within this particular area can exceed 2,500 mm per year. I mentioned earlier, the study is focused within Region 2, the Pomeroon Supernam area. It has a landmass of 6,000, little over 6,000 square kilometers. The primary economic activity within the area is rice farming, followed by coconut farming and cattle rearing. To facilitate this, there's a conservancy, which is a reservoir, basically, a man-made reservoir, which provides irrigation for the farmlands within the region, and it has a capacity of 18 million cubic meters. Region 2 has a very small population. It only accounts for 6% of Guyana's population, with 46,000 residents, and it's currently experiencing negative growth rate. The reasons for this have not been addressed in this presentation. Currently, GWI provides water to this region, and as of 2019, we provided 5.398 million cubic meters of water to the residents of this region. The objective of the project, and it's meant to be a very simple project, as I mentioned later on, some of the issues we have in Guyana is with data. So this was meant to be a simple model looking at what would be the potential impacts of a managed aquifer recharge system employed in the region. Would this actually increase the water levels within the region? Because as we know, the further we take, the deeper we go into our aquifers with our well masters, the more energy, more cost it has on us. And also because these are shallower aquifers and they're closer to the Atlantic Ocean, we can incur saline intrusion. Some of the assumptions that were made in designing the model was that 1, the aquifer is homogeneous and isotropic, 2, that there is connectivity to the Atlantic Ocean, and 3, that the clay formations, which I will describe shortly, dissipate before reaching the basement outcrop. The geological setting for region 2, as it relates to the coastal aquifer, is similar to that of the northern half of the country. It has the low coastal plain, and it has portions of forested highland, and it also has the more important component, which is the white sand series, which aids in the recharge of the coastal aquifer. The potential recharge area for the region has been estimated, and again, because we have not collected as much data within the region with respect to this, I've used Google Earth to estimate this area. It's approximately 3,000 square kilometers, and within the study area itself, it's roughly 300 square kilometers. To describe the coastal aquifer system a little bit, we have several layers, and we have variations in the thickness. So the aquifer itself actually moves in a northeastern direction, and it gets much deeper. You can see that from the contour map of the basement rock in the upper right corner. This results in a much deeper portion of the aquifer present within the eastern segments of Guyana, or the coast, and a much shallower aquifer in the western portion of the coast, which is where Region 2 is located. So the depth at the deepest that we've been able to observe has been around 2,000 meters in the west, and the aquifer in Region 2 ranges between 91 to 150 meters in thickness. So you can see how drastic the thickness changes along the coast. I've got also the different layers and the average thicknesses of the average thickness for each layer within Region 2 specifically. So for example, we have the aquifer on the coast is confined by the Demerara and the Coropina clay formations, and this is roughly 10 meters in thickness within Region 2. This is followed by the Upper Sands Aquifer, which is approximately 22 meters in thickness, and it's currently not exploited because it is it's saline. This is followed by a second confining layer, the intermediate clays, approximately 41 meters in thickness, and the A Sands Aquifer, which is the one we most predominantly exploit, which is 13 meters in thickness within Region 2. This is followed by a second clay layer and a third sand layer, but these are the third sand layer, sorry, is very thin. And then we're confronted with the basement rock. All right, so the methodology employed here, as I mentioned earlier, we do have an issue with data. So a lot of unconventional methods were used. We used a lot of historical reports and historical data that was collected. I've used a lot of the current production data from within GWI, so production and water level data. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I've used Google Earth to assist in delineating the extent of the model and in identifying the elevations within areas that we have not previously explored within the recharge area of Region 2. The standard modeling procedures were followed using GMS to construct the model. Unfortunately, I was not able to complete the model before the conference started. I'm currently at the construction stage and proceeding with the calibration and sensitivity analysis next. But I will present what we have so far, because based on the sources of data and being able to see the conceptual model visualized, for me was important, and I thought I could share that with you this afternoon. So here we have the model. The pink outline is the delineation for Region 3, and the colored block within that is the solid of the study area that has been identified here. And the study area was identified based on the available data for borehole data within the region. So along the coast, we do have several wells. So we were able to log 6 of them using gamma ray technology. So we're able to get an understanding of the lithology there. So we know that is certain. The gray segment within that block represents the Demerara and the Coropina clay formation, and the blue represents the recharge area. Right, the additional boreholes, all of the ones that have BH, are boreholes that I would have created based on the literature available within the area, based on the elevations that I was able to collect, and based on my understanding of the basement rock and how that comes out. Here we can see this is if we were looking at the aquifer from within the Essequibo River. So we're looking inland at the aquifer head first, and we can see where we have the data that we've collected for the boreholes along the coast. We can see where the aquifer and the clay formations. Again, the gray segments are the representative of the clay formation, whereas the blue represents the aquifers. And we can see the clear distinction of the layers within the aquifer based on that information. Right, we can also see in the lower image, this is an extension of another model of the coastal aquifer covering the entire coast from one end to the next. So we can see again where the thickness and the variation in the thickness of the aquifer moves along the coast. This image represents the cross-section of the study area. So now we are looking north, we're looking across the aquifer system. And again, we can see to the right of the image, the layering of the aquifer system, of the various clay and sand formations. Now, the elevation that we see here is representative of the basement outcropping, and the blue where there is white sand. So within the greater part of the, or the eastern part of the aquifer, we know that there is the presence of the white sand series to the basement rock with some clay lenses. And in this case, I have allowed the software to complete the clay lens just before the outcrop of the basement, because if we don't do that, then it would interpret the clay lens going all the way to the basement rock, which would prohibit recharge of the coastal aquifer, and that's not possible. We know that the aquifer is being recharged, and so that clearly it would only make sense for that clay lens to be to dissipate before reaching the basement rock. So, so the next steps would be to calibrate the model and to run the scenarios. And the scenarios will essentially be increasing the volume that is added to the aquifer through the MAR to see if it would have an impact on the water levels, if it will increase the water levels given our existing abstraction levels. To complete the modeling report, of course, and to make recommendations based on the model results. However, based on the process so far and some of the knowledge gathered so far, I have made a few recommendations that can help in making the model better and adding to making better decisions when it comes to MAR and whether this should be employed in the system, in the region, sorry. So one of the recommendations I have is to identify and monitor potential sources for water for the MAR. So in one of the images, you can see that there are several rivers and creeks. I also mentioned the conservancy, which exists within the region, and those are potential sources. The conservancy holds 80 million cubic meters. Our current annual production is 5.2, I believe, million cubic meters. So this should be monitored and assessed at whether it can be a potential source for MAR within the region. An understanding of the lithology within the recharge area, of course, because I have made the assumption that there are no clay lenses, for example, in dissipating the clay lens before it reaches the bedrock, but there may be smaller clay lenses within that area. To determine the hydraulic conductivity, again, I've made the assumption that it is homogeneous and isotropic, but this should be further assessed so that better understanding of how the system functions is had. Study the threats to saline intrusion within the segment. The aquifer is very thin in this area. Within the eastern portion of the aquifer, there's a higher volume of water entering the system and leaving the system via the Atlantic Ocean. And it is presumed based on studies done in the transboundary neighbor, Suriname, that there should not be a threat of saline intrusion within this part of the aquifer. However, given the thickness and the drastic change in the thickness within region 2 of the aquifer system, I believe that this particular portion could be at a greater risk of saline intrusion to the coastal aquifer, especially if our abstraction levels increase over time. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, when we study the potential sources for the MAR system, understanding the relationship between the conservancy specifically is important, because if it is connected already, then we would be serving no purpose in moving the water from the conservancy to a managed aquifer system to put it back into the aquifer because it's already connected. So understanding this relationship should also be done before identifying where and how we would do a marsh system. Right. I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'm open to taking them.
Hi, Angela.
Hi.
Hi, Angela. Are you hearing me properly? I think Amanda is probably having some issues with her mic. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started with the session Q&A. Is everybody hearing me properly? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, I'm very faint. Okay. Could you turn up my mic, please? Are you all hearing me any better?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Thank you, Angela, for that very, very technical presentation. As a modeler myself, I very much appreciate this kind of work going on in the region. And I know Guyana has been doing a lot of work in groundwater modeling, as groundwater is their primary source of water. I'm going to get directly into the session Q&A. The first question, Angela, is from Ms. Candice Santana. Was the saltwater freshwater interface mapped in this area? And if so, how did you do it?
No, it was not mapped. That's why I'm recommending that this sort of work be done. We do some extent of monitoring from within our wells, and we haven't had any indication that there is a threat at the moment. But the interface has not been mapped.
Okay, and are there any plans to map the interface?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. So in terms of the boundary conditions at the coast, what are the assumptions that you're making?
That it is connected to the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay, got you. And this entire presentation was based around managed aquifer recharge, which is also based on the assumption then that the aquifer levels are dropping. Are the aquifer levels dropping in Guyana? That's a question from Maria.
We have been collecting data over the years and have observed a decline, but this may also be the result of the rate and the proximity of wells to each other within the concentrations. Because, for example, it's much higher where we have a concentration of wells like in the capital and within Region 4, but this is much less once we come out of the capital city.
Okay, so what is the greatest water user in Guyana?
For groundwater, it would be us. It would be GWI because we are the primary provider of potable water for the country. There are a few private wells that would be used for manufacturing and so forth, but the greater user would be us.
So the extraction rate is basically to supply the population with potable water, and that's the primary cause of the decline.
No, so our actual abstraction has not significantly increased within a short period of time. But what we've noticed, or at least what I've observed, is a relationship between the cone of influence from the neighboring wells could be mimicking a decline within the coastal aquifers, because once you move out of this concentration, the water levels are much higher than they are on the coast or in the capital.
Okay, so with the level of drawdown that you're seeing more saline intrusion, I'm assuming, at the coast.
No, we're not.
No, you're not.
No.
Okay.
So what? So along where the capital is in heart of the thicker parts of the coastal aquifer. So there's a higher volume of water coming in. And in the study that Suriname, because the aquifer is transboundary with Suriname, they found that they had a huge freshwater plume entering the Atlantic Ocean. And our aquifer is much thicker on our side of the border than theirs. So it can be assumed that we will likely have a very large freshwater plume going into the Atlantic Ocean as well. And because we do monitor for salinity within our wells, we have not observed any increases with that over time. I think it's fair to say that we don't have current saline intrusion problem.
Okay, great. And I saw that in the setup of your model, you're assuming that the aquifer is homogeneous and isotropic. Of course, I know that this is a starting assumption, and you will build on this eventually.
Right.
But what are some of the parameters that you're going to use based on the data that you have that you're going to use to calibrate the model with? Do you know that already?
Yeah, I have the historic values of the wells within the area when they were initially drilled. So I have those initial values to use.
Okay, so those would be some of your initial boundary conditions, I'm assuming.
So I have the water level data, I have the initial flow and drawdown from that
Right.
period. And I'm using a flow boundary because it's just a segment of the aquifer. It's not the entire aquifer system, with the exception of where the basement rock outcrops, which would be a new.
So what are your hydraulic boundaries for that part of the aquifer that you're going to model? Is there, I heard you mention the Aquifer River. Is that a hydraulic boundary?
No, because where the wells are, they don't. I've cut off at before the Aquifer River.
Okay.
And also because the Aquifer River has that clay bed, so it wouldn't have
Okay.
it wouldn't have an interaction at that point. It would be only, and within the recharge area, it doesn't actually connect to the Aquifer River.
Okay.
It's already further inland.
Okay, great. Here's a question from Hala Sahili. How are you determining the lithology? Is it resistivity technique?
We used gamma logging. A couple of years ago, we logged a few of our wells, and we were able to log those 6 wells along that coast area. But we use gamma technology.
Okay. And here's a question from Dr. Adrian Cashman. Do you have any indication of the age of the groundwater?
Not yet. Not yet, but we hope to very soon. Not yet. But it's clear
Okay.
that in some parts it's younger than others, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the depth and the
Right.
high iron concentrations that we experience. But we don't know the exact age of it just yet.
Right. So following from Dr. Cashman's question, is there any information on the time of concentration for a water droplet to reach a particular aquifer or a particular level in the aquifer? Do you have that information?
No, we haven't done that level of work yet.
Okay. Um, Here's a question from Kwame. Guyana is a water abundant territory, but suffers from water quality issues. What
Right.
percentage of Guyana's freshwater resources is considered polluted, and what percent is characterized as saline?
Sorry, you broke up there a minute, Anuradha.
Sorry, okay,
Repeat
going
it?
again. Guyana is a water abundant territory, but suffers from water quality issues. What percentage of Guyana's freshwater resources is considered polluted, and what percent is characterized as saline?
I cannot answer that offhand.
Okay.
However, from my environmental perspective, I would want to be cautious with how we define the pollution aspect, because like for example, on our coast, our water is murky, but that's not necessarily pollution on our part. With respect to the pollution within the coastal aquifer basin, that has not been determined. And within our rivers, we do have some amount of pollution. I can't give you the percentage right now, but I know we do have some amount of pollution coming out for mining activities, particularly in rivers leading into the Essequibo River. We do have policies and so in place to help abate that, but I can't give you the number right now, but I can check it out and I can respond later on in the Zoom, in the
Okay.
mobile app.
Okay, great. And one final question. Is agriculture being taken into consideration in your model in terms of evapotranspiration? I heard you mention rice planting.
Right.
So yeah.
It is not, because the agricultural activity, the rice farming that happens in that region actually happens on the Demerara and the Corupina clay formation. So
Okay.
it's actually, the aquifer system is protected from that activity.
Okay. Okay, and there's no other agricultural activity that's going on in
No,
that area.
no,
Okay.
within the recharge area, it's primarily, it's primarily forested area. It's not inhabited and it's not used. It's natural forest.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in, and to everyone else, oh, we do have one more question here. Sorry. A question from Ms. Santana. Was any type of pump testing done at these coastal wells, including concentrate test and recovery test?
Not in these yet, but we are working on that. We've started collecting along the coast. We haven't reached region 2 yet.
Right. And that would obviously give you some parameters to work with as
Yes,
well for your
it
model.
would. Yeah, it would.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your presentation. This was fantastic. And for everyone else, you can continue to key in your questions. Angela will check back and answer those questions via the Google app. And continue to be part of our sessions today. This is our last session today. Tomorrow, our session kicks off with a technical seminar at 9 a.m. in the morning. So please join us for that. Continue to check out our exhibitor booths, our sponsors, and continue to interact. There's been a lot of interaction going on in the Hoover app, which is fantastic. So it's really great to see everybody interacting just as if they were in person. So that's fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you again, Angela. And do have a great evening.
You too.